Hi and welcome back to the first actual lecture of this video series on CCNA cybersecurity operations. For this lecture I decided to remove my pretty face so you can hopefully enjoy the video a little bit more without me staring at you. So what we will do in this first lecture is to take a bird's eye view on the security topic. We're going to talk a little bit about the threat landscape. I'll begin with some stories of threats that actually happened, so you will get an idea of how IT and IT-related threats impact the world today. We will then talk about threat actors who actually perform attacks and the impact of threats. Then we'll zoom in on what is called the Security Operations Center, and we will look at the elements, people, processes, and technologies that are in the Security Operations Center. So I will use the term SOC for the Security Operations Center from now on, and if you want the very quick response to what a SOC is essentially a command and control center from where you lead your security work. But before we go into that, let's look at the threat landscape. So in the dawn of days, as far as the internet world goes, so maybe like 30 years or so ago, hackers were commonly motivated. We had hackers already then, but the hackers were commonly motivated by the challenge of hacking. So they maybe hacked something, which was really easy because no one thought of security at all. And they did hack something and they left a print, some sort of message about the issue at the hacked device. So for instance, maybe they went into a newspaper page, they hacked it for the fun of it and posted some fun news. And then came the criminals that hacked for financial gain. So hackers realized, or criminals realized, that people are using internet and computers for all sorts of things. We can utilize this. We can utilize this to make money. If we take over people's computers, if we find their information, so on and so forth, we can use hacking to get money. Then came the hacktivists. Anonymous is a type of hacktivist, people that hack for or use cause security breaches for political reasons. So we've seen, for instance, that when different states do something that doesn't sit well with the hacktivists, they may do a denial of service attack and take down the national infrastructure or the governmental webpage or something like that. And what we see today is an increase in something that we call state-sponsored hacking. So realize that in modern day, the way that the world works today, everything is connected. So hospitals are connected. We rely on internet for all sorts of communication. We rely on the internet for banking, and so on and so forth. So the states, any state I guess, realize this, and we now see that states are investing tons of money into building offensive cyber capabilities, so they can actually attack other nations using the internet. And we've seen a few examples of this, which we'll get into in just a little while. So this is the threat landscape right now, and we have all of those. So we still have the hackers that hack only for the fun of it. We do still have the criminals that hack for financial gain. We still have the hacktivists, and we also have state-sponsored hacking. And this is what we have to defend against. So let's exemplify a little bit. And let's start with ransomware, and I want to take up ransomware right away because it's a really big thing now. Ransomware are quite common, and it's a malware that essentially takes your data hostage and demands a ransom. So what a ransomware is that it's a malware that infects the target machine and then usually encrypts some or all of the data. And then you will have a pop-up saying that, hey, we encrypted your data, do you want it back? Well, you can get it back, but then you have to pay a ransom. So it's basically taking data hostage. And one example that you can read up on your own is CryptoLocker, that got a lot of attention just a couple of years ago. If we want to look at an example of a state-sponsored attack, that would be STUXNET. And I'm not going to point any fingers, or I'm going to try to avoid it, because I don't want to get too political. But anyway, STUXNET was a word that infected PLCs in Iranian nuclear facilities. The idea here was that you needed a way to hold back the Iranian nuclear program. So what this worm did was that it damaged centrifuges, something that has to do with the nuclear power plant thingies that I don't really know about, and because of this, the Iranian nuclear program was held back. And this is an early example of what is supposedly at least state-sponsored hacking or state-sponsored attack, where the Iranian nuclear program was specifically targeted. There is a nice documentary on this that you can watch whenever you have time. You can find it at the URL here, zerodaysfilm.com. And I really encourage you to watch that one because it's really interesting. Another more recent example that had a lot more collateral damage, damage to actors that weren't really the target of the attack, was the NotPetya. This was a ransomware worm that targeted Ukraine. Perhaps not ransomware because it wasn't really possible to reverse the encryption, but it was malware that encrypted the infected hosts and in that way rendered the data stored there useless. There's been reports that the worm was the result of Russian warfare or Russian cyber warfare against Ukraine. I guess you know that there is a conflict, an ongoing conflict between Russia and Ukraine, and there are reports that this NotPetya worm was the result of Russian cyber warfare. And what I want to point out here was that, well, Ukraine was of course affected because they were the target by all evidence. But several large companies, including Maersk and FedEx, was also infected as collateral damage, and the total damages of this malware was estimated to be above $10 billion. So this is an example of state-sponsored cyber warfare that really results in a lot of damage to private companies. And there is a long link that you can pause and paraphrase if you want to read more about this. Really interesting stuff from a cybersecurity perspective. But who does this? Who are the guys that attack us? The parties, if we want to go into terminology, the parties that do carry out attacks are called threat actors, and they include amateurs or script kiddies to begin with, and those are hackers that basically have little or no skills at all. They download tools created by others and will execute them. The motivation for the script kiddies can be different, but they usually do stuff just for fun or to show what they can. And the thing is that while I am calling them amateurs, or the CCNA material calls the script kiddies amateurs with little or no skill, they can really cause a lot of damage because there are so many very sophisticated tools out there. You will use them throughout this course, and you don't really need much knowledge to cause a lot of damage to an IT system. Okay, leaving the script kiddies, we have the hacktivists, and those are attackers that protest. They cause disruption or leak sensitive information. That's basically what they do. They hack for political gain in different ways. Then we have organized crime groups. Criminals or criminal groups that are doing attacks for financial gain. Those can be individual, but they can also be grouped. And here we see things as credit card theft, spam, the Nigerian letters, for instance. Ransomware is one example. A lot of things that you can do to earn money. And then we have those states or state-sponsored organizations that, they basically do three things. Cyber warfare, or you could think that they would aid warfare using cyber attacks. So let me just paint a picture. I mean, in the very old age, you had swords and shields, and when you wanted to attack someone, you went there, you walked or went there by horse, and then came the weaponry and stuff. But it's usually been physical. But what happens if you do a military attack against another nation, and at the same time you do cyber warfare to turn off the power grid, turn off communication, make hospitals work worse, and so on and so forth. And these are things that states or state-sponsored organizations can do. Another big thing is to steal intellectual properties. There are some nations out there that are not too fond of copyright and patents, so, well, they spy and steal what they can, or espionage. And this is a real thing. So those are the threat actors that we have. We'll go through them more in detail and talk about them even more throughout the course, but for now, let's just take a short word on threat impact. So there are two terms that I need you to know if you're going for the CCNA certification. Those are words that doesn't make any big sense in Sweden. I tell you, I guess they're American terms. But we can say that one type of threat impact is the disclosure of personal information. So in Europe, we have the GDPR that is supposed to safeguard personal information and make sure that it's handled in a correct way by companies and organizations that have our personal information. And in the US, you have those terms personally identifiable information and personal health information, PII and PHI. Know those terms. Personally identifiable information, that's information that can identify you as a person, and personal health information is, well, health information such as disease history and stuff like that. Another threat possible impact of a threat being realized is the loss of competitive advantage. So this can either be loss of intellectual property. Let's say that you're a company that invests a lot of money into research. Your idea is to, well, come up with a cure for cancer or whatnot. And then comes someone else from another nation and just steals your patents and manages to either release the product to compete with you or even release the product before you. This is something that happened time and time again. And that is, of course, something that's going to take off your competitive advantage. Another thing is loss of trust. So let's think that you're a bank. If you're a bank, people trust you to keep their money safe. But if you get targeted by a cyber attack and you lose money or well, your website just goes down for a couple of days, then people is going to lose trust in you and you will lose customers. And we, of course, have to consider national security issues. So what happens if the power grid is attacked? How long can we live without electricity in the modern world? What happens if the 911 call center goes down? What will happen to society if you can't call the police, the fire department, call for an ambulance, and so on and so forth? And those are all different examples of threat impact, the impact of a threat being realized. So we need to acknowledge that we have several and well-motivated attackers. And we also have, there is also a great impact if a threat is realized against us. And to safeguard against this, we must establish the capability to effectively defend against those threat actors. And to what we really need to do, what is vital, is that we, well, first of all, need to comply with laws. We need to comply with PII, PHI, GDPR, and so on and so forth. Because, well, if we don't, there is going to be a fine against us, and the fines may be huge. What we also need to ensure is that we can remain normal operations or resume normal operation when something happens. If we're a car manufacturing company, our goal one is to ensure that we can create or build cars. If we can't do that, well, then we will not be a company much longer because, well, there's no cars to sell. And on the national level, we have to maintain critical civil services. It has to be possible to call 911. We need to provide electricity, and so on and so forth. And to do this, we need to have cyber defense. So a final note before we move on. The defense capabilities that we build should be in proportion to what we defend. I had a lecturer once that told me that you wouldn't buy $1 million safe to store a banana, and that's very true. So when we are talking about how we can and should defend our networks, we have to be aware of what we're actually defending. And this is actually a key point, in my opinion, to what security is. Security is not something that lives in its own bubble. Security is something that you build for a network or for an organization or for an individual computer, and you should take the appropriate security measures to safeguard what you're actually safeguarding. Security should be a way to support a business and not a core part of the business. Unless, of course, you're a security consultant company, then it should be the core business. Well, anyway, let's have a few slides on the Secure Operations Center, or the SOC. So modern defense capabilities include having a formalized, structured and disciplined approach. We don't want to be reactive, we want to be proactive, and we want to think security and have security built into our organization. And security professionals are often organized in something that you call the Secure Operations Center, or a SOC, where you basically do security management, security monitoring, and handle security. So this is basically the security department. And depending on your size and your needs, the SOC can of course be something that's in-house or fully or partially contracted out to someone else. So if you're a large company or a state, you would most likely have your own SOC or even several. If you're a smaller company, you would have it fully or partially contracted out, I guess. If we want to formalize the SOC, it contains 3 different elements: processes, peoples, and technology, and we're going to go through those terms in just a few slides. But before we do that, let's look at the different roles that we can have in a SOC, or the different roles that a SOC has according to the CCNA Cybersecurity Operations Curriculum. So this is something you need to know for your certification exam. Basically, a SOC is organized as most IT help desks, with analysts or security experts in different tiers and a manager. So to begin, we have the Tier 1 analyst. Those are the first contacts, usually for security-related concerns. Those guys monitor alerts. So you have alert systems, logging facilities and such in your network that will generate alerts when something is happening. Those are monitored by Tier 1 analysts. They verify if a true incident occurred. So something you will learn throughout the course is that when we have those logging programs, firewalls, intrusion detection systems, they may alarm or alert when there is nothing to alert for, and you can't do a full security analysis process every time you have an alert. So the Tier 1 analysts are in charge of determining whether or not a true incident occurred. And if they need to, they will escalate tickets to the Tier 2 incident responders. The Tier 2 incident responders are usually more senior people that are in charge of deep incident investigation. So the Tier 1 analyst says, well, look at this, something may have happened. The Tier 2 incident responder will go into details about that particular incident and really try to figure out what's happened. They also give advice or remediate whatever needs to be done. So they basically do solve the incident or escalate it further and provide advice on what security measures that needs to be taken in the network. Then we have the Tier 3 subject matter expert, or SMEs. And those are experts in networking, endpoint security, threat intelligence, malware reverse engineering, or such. They are subject matter experts. They're experts in their particular field of security. Those usually do things like trace malware, hunt potential threats, implement threat detection tools, do security reviews on the network, for instance. They can do implement firewall rules or intrusion detection rules, stuff like that. Then we have the SOC manager that manages the SOC resources and is the point of contact for the rest of the organization or customers. So if we look a little bit about the processes that takes part in those different tiers. So in Tier 1, where we have the Tier 1 analysts, we have incident monitoring. We open and take initial care of tickets that come in, and we do basic threat mitigation. So if a computer needs to be reinstalled, there is no reason to call a higher level expert. We can do it ourselves. Then we have Tier 2 that do the deep investigation and give advice on remediations. And then we have Tier 3 where we do threat hunting, we have the in-depth knowledge when it's needed, and we implement preventive measures. But to do all of this, we also need technology, and a secure operations center is dependent on security information and event management systems, or SIEMs. And what those SIEMs do is basically collect and aggregate information from a number of different sources. So we have sensors out there in the network that track network traffic, network flows, system logs, security events, threat intelligence from other sources, aggregates this and makes it into something useful. And this is the heart of the SOC. A SIEM, which is a log collection and or information collection and aggregation tool that we will go into much more detail about. Let me just end with a slide on security and availability. And I want to stress this again. Security is there to ensure normal operation and maximum uptime. There is no other point in having security. We want to make sure that the company and its network can run as intended. And the role of the security team is to ensure that the organization can operate efficiently. If we implement security that hinders the organization, then we failed. Nothing else. And something that I can say from my research is that one of the biggest reasons for why security fail is because we as security experts develop procedures and programs that are too complicated or too hindering for the users, so they just don't care about them. So if you want to take something from this course or something from me as a lecturer, it is to make security tools usable. But we still do need to be aware, of course, that security and functions may sometimes be in conflict. And I added a table here of how much downtime you can have per year with different availability demands in percent. I'm not going to discuss this, but memorize this before you take your certification test, because I'm sure there will be at least one question about it. That was it for this lecture, so I'll say until next time. If you have any questions or comments, feel free to leave them in the comments field. But I do have to say that stress that you should have a positive attitude when you comment things online. And try to avoid being hateful and distasteful. And if that happens, I will remove the videos from YouTube and just provide them to my own students. So, good. This was chapter 1. Until next time, have a good day.